What's good, y'all? It's Pod.cannion, and I'm back with another reaction video. We got a Twisted Minds, Nathaniel, the 11-year-old killer. Now, I'm just interested on this because, I always be watching videos, on the side or when I'm at work, kind of, dealing with, you know what I'm saying? People's interpretations of the human minds, really studying that. I feel like it's interesting because I feel like, you know what I'm saying, the more we realize how each other think, the more we're able to understand each other and, you know what I'm saying, give grace to each other. Now, obviously, these are very controversial and extreme cases. So the average human is not going to be like this guy, but just certain cases like this, it's just interesting to see, was there anything that got this person to this point, or were they just crazy off rip? Just some things to think about. I don't usually do these type of reactions, but I feel like I want to at least add some type of variety, and you know what I'm saying, if y'all like it, I may add a little bit more in there, you know. And this is usually something like once I'm done with my usual reactions, I'll just kick back and edit while having something like this in the background. But I've edited most of the reaction videos for this week already. So I was like, it feels weird not having one documentary or something in the background. So I was like, why don't I just kick back, spark a J, and watch this with y'all? I'll try to not have too many yapping moments, but no promises, y'all. Um, Make sure everything's recording. Check, check. This is a longer video, so I'm gonna try to have the playback speed be a little bit faster. Um, just to catch us up a little bit because there are more than an hour long videos on this channel, but at least with reactions, I try to keep it in the 20-minute zone. So let's get it.
Nathaniel Abraham was just 11 years old when he found himself in the middle of one of the most controversial murder cases in the history of the United States of America. The case scandalized the country, and almost everyone responded with outrage. A murder case. But the folks on Nathaniel's block, his own neighbors, well, they weren't particularly shocked. He might have been little, measuring no more than 4 feet, and...
See, that's the little stuff I was talking about. Why weren't the neighbors shocked? And he's 11. Why is he... You know what? If I ask too many questions, we're going to be here a while.
A little under 65 pounds, but he was also a thorn in the side of everyone in the neighborhood, a danger to the community.
He threatened my grandsons all the time. He threw rocks at my mom's house. I mean, he was dangerous.
And she wasn't alone. Another neighbor, an 11-year-old girl, shared a similar sentiment because, according to her, when they were both 9, Nate had threatened her with a gun. So, as Nathaniel Abraham's murder case began to take its hold in this...
I live in Newport News 757 area. So, usually, it should be oh, there's no way an 11-year-old could get a hold of a gun. I went to Rich Neck Elementary School. That is the same elementary school where, obviously, after I left the middle school, because at least my generation wasn't that wild, but I'm in work, and I hear that a 6-year-old, you can look this up. I promise y'all can look this up. A 6 or 7-year-old brought a gun to school and shot a teacher. Now, the teacher is okay. She got her bag, okay? But that shit is wild, y'all. And that's why I'm not really as surprised as I feel like I should be hearing that a 9-year-old threatened another 9-year-old with a gun. Because the first question that should pop in your mind is, why the fuck was there even a scenario where the child got that weapon in the first place? That's the question I ask with each time. And dang, it's 6 or 7. I could not fathom that number or that age. You want to shoot somebody and you do it. Yo, wild.
Center of public consciousness, it became clear that his entire block had turned against him. As disturbing as these allegations sounded, it seemed like they were true. All of his neighbors wanted him locked up. Except one. Only one neighbor on Nate's block came to his defense when the cameras started rolling. He didn't try to downplay or dismiss claims about the boy.
I think that's crazy for him to be charged as an adult. He was only 11 years old.
This neighbor was convinced that the little boy wasn't the devil. He was just a broken child who made terrible decisions. This man had also experienced a version of Nate that his neighbors hadn't got the chance to see. He wanted the government and the prosecutors to go easy on the young boy. Why? Because Nathaniel Abraham was an 11-year-old boy charged with the murder of an 18-year-old named Ronnie Green. Because in the most controversial turn of events, the state of Michigan was willing and ready to try him as an adult due to the severity of his crime. And if they found him guilty, if the prosecutors were able to get what they wanted, little Nate would spend the rest of his life in prison for a crime he committed when he was just 11. Some of you watching would say murder is murder regardless of the age. That's what makes the intricacies of this story.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's really a situational case now. I'm not for any judicial system because I feel like they're corrupt to the core if I'm keeping shit a ban. So, like, I probably even still... Damn, I don't know which side I would be on. Honestly. Like I gotta figure out more information before I make a decision.
All the more interesting. Let me set the record straight before we dive into this case.
Okay.
The true victim in this story was 18-year-old Ronnie Green.
Yes,
Nate was a preteen who killed a teenager, and now he had to face the consequences. So, what went...
Yo, I would not know how to feel if I'm getting gunned down by 11-year-old at 18. Yo, like, R.I.P. to the person. But I know he was pissed. He had to have been like...
We have to trace the thread back to the very beginning. Pontiac, Michigan, 1986.
86.
Months after he was born, his father left and never returned.
Damn.
This sudden change resulted in incredible hardship for the family because Nate wasn't the only child. There were 6 of them. His mother, Gloria, was forced to take up 2 jobs to keep their family afloat. She had to work day and night, so she was never around. And Nate's formative years were spent under the care of his older siblings. Gloria was caught between a rock and a hard place, between spending time raising her children or working hard to ensure they didn't starve to death. It's no easy dilemma. However, this whole situation turned out to be the perfect storm for something dark within Nate. With no one to keep him in check, Nate became delinquent. From the moment he could walk, he began to exhibit extremely antisocial behavior. Many kids show these traits when they're young. Parents corrected and rooted out, but no one was around to do that for Nate. So it grew into something so ugly that by the time that he was 9, he had become a troublesome child with a rap sheet of a serious middle-aged criminal. Damn. From the age of 9 till 11, Nate had 22 police encounters. Some for arson, a couple of others for assault, and several for breaking and entering. Out of those 22, at least 5 involved the use of a weapon. One involved a 14-year-old that he beat with a steel pipe, and the last involved an adult, a bus driver. At some point, he became such a problem in the neighborhood that the prosecutors would later reveal in court that a neighbor moved out of the block because of him. That same neighbor would also say, quite prophetically, that someday Nate was going to kill somebody. Now, you are probably wondering what Nate's mother did during this period. At some point, she began to feel helpless when almost every day there was someone knocking on their door reporting Nate's latest crime. One major reason why she felt helpless was because that she had actually gone to the police for help. She wanted them to intervene in her son's situation, but they referred her to the juvenile court. And when she got there, they sent her back to the police, telling her that her word wasn't enough. No one was prepared to help. Nobody was ready to intervene.
Unhelpful ass cops once again. I'm sorry.
Now, remember when I said Nate was born into a perfect storm? There was one more piece left for the chaotic future he was now destined to have. The 1980s was a very interesting decade in American history. Ronald Reagan became president. CNN became a thing. There were those interesting looking Macintosh computers, and then there was violence. Widespread violence in major cities like New York and Chicago. However, the most troubling part of the 1980s was the spike in the level of violent crimes committed by juveniles. Between 1980 and 1994, the number of juvenile homicide offenders doubled. And according to FBI clearance statistics from that time frame, the juvenile responsibility for all homicides in the country grew from 5% to 10%. The quick answer to why this was happening was the crack epidemic of the mid-1980s. In the inner cities, it had become a plague, and it wasn't long before those drugs got paired with guns and juveniles. Now, the progression from drug trade to gun violence isn't surprising. In fact, many would agree it's natural and expected. But how did kids get into the mix? Well, drug traffickers at the time found that children and teenagers made excellent recruits, better than adults. Children worked as low-level sellers, carriers, and lookouts, while working for less, taking greater risks, and escaping detention. Because at the time, no one would have guessed that an 11-year-old standing on a street corner was a drug dealer. And even when these kids got caught, their age implied innocence, and it meant that they escaped punishment. From the drug dealer's perspective, these juveniles were beyond perfect. So it wasn't long before these same juveniles came in contact with guns and began using them for their own protection.
Wild seeing who else gets those
They aspired to use them because guns had become a status symbol.
So one of the crack epidemic birthed young niggas? Bro, the government stay dropping off new things to create young niggas, bro. Now young niggas got whippets and... Let me stop.
For the drug-dealing lifestyle that these kids now wanted to be a part of. And that's why just a decade earlier in 1976, records showed that less than 2/3 of juvenile homicide offenders used a gun. And by 1994, 82% of juveniles used a gun in cases of homicide. This was the background of Nate's childhood. And while there is no record of drug-dealing activity on his juvenile record, it wouldn't be wild to suggest that he found himself in that crowd, and that it was that crowd that enabled his truancy. Where else do you think he got the gun he used?
Yeah.
His mother didn't own a gun. Now, as expected, the government's response to this spike of violent, gun-fueled juvenile delinquency was to turn to the law. So, as the 1980s progressed, a growing number of states passed laws stipulating that kids under 17 could be tried as adults for certain crimes.
Okay.
It was a weird way to deal with the problem because they weren't seeking direct solutions. They were just adding to the punishment. Supporters of this law who happened to be civilians like you and me took to the streets, waving banners and slogans that read, "Adult crime, adult time." And by 1992, more than 40 states had passed laws for trying children as adults. But no state's version of the juvenile justice law matched the severity of Michigan's. Michigan, the same state that Nathaniel Abraham was born in, raised in, and would commit his devastating crime in, set no limits on the age that a child could be tried as an adult. They called their law "Get Tough on Juvenile Offenders." In fact, when one of the state senators who pushed for this law was asked if a child as young as 4 could be tried as an adult, his answer was a resounding yes. The stage was now set for Nathaniel Abraham's crime. And 3 years after that law was...
Yeah, I'm starting to not agree with this child law. Just because y'all clearly aren't addressing with the root of the problem. Y'all are dealing with a result that the problem is causing and trying to act like that's one of the roots of the problem, but it's not. And I know they did like the war on drugs, but even the way that they handled the war on drugs was not really the right way to go. And depending on who you are, you might be inclined to believe that the government had more of a play on all that crack ending up in black neighborhoods in the first place. Because how the fuck did it get there? Who imported all that? Who in the black neighborhood had the money to import all of that? I'm just asking questions. Let's get on with the video.
In 1997, when 11-year-old Nathaniel Abraham shot 18-year-old Ronnie Green, he became the scapegoat of a law that set the scene.
Yep, he shot him. Damn, I wouldn't know.
Country's most controversial juvenile murder trial to date. On the 31st of October, 1997, there was a commotion in Lincoln Middle School. There were police officers in the 6th grade class, and they were reading their rights. Not to the class teacher, but to 11-year-old Nathaniel Abraham, dressed up in a Halloween costume. A day before, on the 30th of October, 1997, an 18-year-old boy named Ronnie Green had passed away after fighting for his life for almost 24 hours. He had been shot in the head by a single bullet from a .22 caliber rifle. As investigators scrambled to find out who this killer was, they discovered that on the day before, 11-year-old Nathaniel Abraham had stolen a .22 caliber rifle and gone shooting outside. He shot at a neighbor's house first, narrowly missing the man who owned the house. And moments later, he stood in a cluster of trees about 200 feet away from a convenience store, took aim, and fired a bullet that would hit 18-year-old Ronnie Green in the head and kill him roughly a day later.
So he didn't even see the shot. He was just hiding in the trees and got hunted? And imagine getting shot outside of your own, like inside your own house, or like, he said he nearly got shot, so just a bullet passing through the motherfucking walls and whizzing by you. Oh my gosh, I would be in shock. I would be questioning if that even happened. What am I going?
Admitted that he was the one who shot Ronnie. He denied targeting him. Instead, he claimed that he was only aiming for light bulbs and trees. The shot that killed Ronnie Green was, by his own admission, an unfortunate error. The prosecutor...
He ain't even do it on purpose either. It's just irresponsible young nigga walking around doing things and accidentally shot someone. See, that's even like, of course, a life was still lost at the end of the day. And this easily could have been prevented if they just had caring adults in the area or competent police. Like, fuck. Like, this is disappointing, you know, because that wasn't his intention. Like, of course, people are like, oh yeah, he had reports of being dangerous. That's with anyone who isn't brought up right, you know. But this dude was 11, and this could have easily been prevented. Like, fuck.
Weren't buying it. Despite the fact that the 11-year-old boy had never met Ronnie Green before the shooting, they were convinced that he had deliberately set out to kill someone that day. If you're wondering what fueled the prosecutor's conviction, well, they had evidence that Nate had spoken to his girlfriend, saying that he was going to kill someone on the morning of Ronnie Green's tragic demise, and that, after the shooting, he had bragged about the kill he made to his friends. With the backing of Michigan's Get Tough on Juvenile Offenders law, the prosecutors received permission to try...
See, these are 11-year-old accounts, so I don't know if they can hold that much weight. But at the same time, children, like, I worked in the Boys and Girls Club. Children gonna snitch on you in a heartbeat. Like, that's where you get the most accurate account of the story. Because the child gonna be like, oh yeah, they was doing that, and they was doing that, and that, and that. Like, they can lie, but their ability to lie well and have, like, a consistent lie, I don't know about that one. Like, yeah, depending who you are, you could either not take the child's account seriously or take the child's account seriously. But with Nate and his history of violent crime, I kind of can see how the prosecutors could be inclined to believe. My first thought was that they was racist, but hey, they got some grounds for this at the very least.
Nate as an adult, charging...
I still wouldn't... Yeah, damn. Fuck. So that's even worse. So, like, let's say he was doing it on purpose, and instead of aiming for light bulbs, he was aiming for heads instead, and Nathaniel just so happened to be a head that walked by. That means this man was just like, hey, I just want to kill something. That's a little cray-cray, and I can see them being scared with that.
With first-degree murder and several other felonies. Yep. Nate was arrested, placed in handcuffs, and he was sent to Oakland County Children's Village, a juvenile detention center in Michigan, while he awaited trial. The arrest was deeply controversial. Controversial enough to deeply divide the country along several ethical lines. While there were many unwilling to contribute to the discussion, there were many more who thought that this was a fitting punishment for the 11-year-old Nate. There was an overwhelming majority, especially in the black community, who were against the decision. Amnesty International, Reverend Al Sharpton, and probably every major civil rights activist in the country protested against the whole affair, calling it a disgrace to the justice system that should protect children, delinquent or not. Like I noted earlier, they were trying to try him as an adult, and if he was found guilty, he would be sent to prison for the rest of his life. One lawyer was outraged enough by the case that he chose to take it on pro bono, at no cost to Nate's family. This lawyer was named Jeffrey Feiger. He was a lawyer who, up to that point, had built a reputation for taking on most cases that lawyers wouldn't touch. His most infamous past client at that time was a man named Jack Kevorkian, also known as Dr. Death. Jack Kevorkian was an actual doctor with the rap sheet of a comic book villain. On his rap sheet, the man had advocated harvesting the organs from death row inmates. While he was a pathologist, he experimented with transfusing blood from the recently deceased into live patients. He did a lot of bizarre, unethical things throughout his career as a doctor, but the most controversial one, the one that got Jeffrey Feiger representing him as his attorney in court, involved assisted suicide in Michigan. Kevorkian's story is worthy of its own video, so I won't go down that rabbit hole.
Okay.
Just know that while Nate's situation was controversial...
Because that's an interesting video as well, like...
It was not new to Jeffrey Feiger, and immediately he took on Nate's case. He began a series of motions and appeals that delayed the trial for at least 2 more years, enough time for him to prepare. On the 29th of October 1999, the murder trial began. Nate's first appearance in court looked like something from a really dark SNL sketch. He was dressed in oversized prison garb. There were cuffs on his wrists and chains on his feet. When he was asked to raise his right hand, he raised his left. Halfway through the hearings, he would start sobbing, and for most of the trial, he looked lost. But prosecutors and the politicians who supported this law were hell-bent on seeing it through to the end.
Insane.
I'm going to shoot somebody. In her opening statement, the prosecutor, Lisa Haluska, dramatically wrote down those words for the jury to read. She claimed that these were the words that 11-year-old Nate told his girlfriend days before the killing. As the trial progressed, this prosecutor called witnesses who supported the idea that Nathaniel's act was, in fact, a premeditated murder. According to the witnesses, he had stolen the rusty rifle he used, then practiced target shooting at balloons and the houses of his neighbors before the fatal shooting of Ronnie Green. Later, the prosecutor would also note that Nate had told the police contradicting stories about the shooting, which, according to her, was proof that he knew what he had done and that it was wrong. When it was Joffrey Feiga's turn, he argued that the shooting was an unfortunate accident. He didn't dispute the fact that Nathaniel fired the gun, but he insisted that the boy was not trying to hit anyone. Feiga brought an expert marksman to stand as a witness who testified that it would have been almost impossible to deliberately hit a small target from more than 200 feet, which was the approximate distance Nate was from the victim. And it was even more unlikely because the rifle he used was old and battered. Later, Feiga called on child psychologists to describe Nathaniel's mental state. According to these experts, Nate had an IQ of 70, and at the time of the murder, his thought process were like those of a 6-year-old. Feiga tried to prove that Nathaniel lacked impulse control and the mental capacity to form the intent to kill. However, the prosecution brought their own psychologist to the stand as a witness, and he rebutted the claim that Nate couldn't form an intent to kill. Nate's case was a delicate one. If you were in front of the family of the deceased, how could you say your son's killer was just a child? In a way, there was something odd about the entire premise of the case, because if Nate had been a 30-year-old man who was examined by a court psychologist and determined to have the mental capacity of a 6-year-old, would a 30-year-old Nate still be tried? But wait a minute, the plot thickens, because the Constitution also stipulates that Nate be tried by a jury of his peers. And we both know that there is no way the court was going to do a pre-teen jury selection in an elementary school. So the jury that was hearing Nate's case were all adults. There were constitutional gaps that this murder trial allowed. When a journalist confronted the prosecution about it, they argued that the adult nature of Nate's crime and the severity of the consequences of his crime on the victim's family was what justified the jury of adults. At the end of the day, the truth was, even though 2 years had passed since he committed the crime and Nathaniel Abraham was now 13, he was still too young to drive a car, too young to drink, too young to vote. And as a direct consequence of this, people still argue that he should have been too young to be tried as an adult. In the final days of the trial, the prosecutors began seeking a compromise. No more first-degree murder charges. Now they were asking the presiding judge, on Nate's behalf, to allow the jury to consider a lesser offense. Whether this was out of goodwill or because there was no victory in sending an 11-year-old to life behind bars, well, no one knows. What we do know is that it worked.
Okay. At least they didn't do that for the child, so I feel like maybe the prosecution was maybe slightly influenced by the defense. Even though I think like before the case even goes on, they already see both of the sides. So maybe they thought like, maybe we won't act so cruel, but there still needs to be justice put in place. I feel like that's a good move by the prosecution to lower the sentence because, you know, it's really the situation he's in. Like, of course, you have some responsibility in your decisions, but just like they said, like, that's the way I was thinking. Like, he was just acting like a kid, just shooting stuff. I can easily see that over him deliberately shooting someone. Once again, I don't know this child, and there has been a very thorough rap sheet of him being violent to other people. But even still, when you just see a young kid, I just always feel like there is a chance for that child to change for the better. Just, you know what I'm saying? Putting him in a better situation for him to develop with more positive influences around him. Like, if all he sees is drugs, guns, and being neglected by his family around him, it's going to encourage and cause him to act out to seek that attention that he's not getting at home. But if you put this person in a spot, not even like a detention center, but just somewhere else where he has positive influences, this could have been easily avoided, and I feel like um, this type of person, especially at the age of 11, who they are is not set in stone. They can definitely change because their brain is still developing until they're like 25. So, yeah, that's my stance on it, I feel like.
On the 16th of November 1999, Nate was found guilty of second-degree murder, which still made him the youngest American to be ever convicted of murder as an adult.
Ugh.
And there were 3 options on the table for the
All right.
judge. The first was the harshest, a prison term of 8 to 25 years. The second option was more moderate, blended sentence, and it would see Nate go to a juvenile detention center. By the time he turned 18, if he was properly rehabilitated, he
So,
would be
is
released.
this a picture of Nate when he's older?
He would be transferred to an adult prison after turning 21 to serve the rest of his 25-year sentence. This was what the prosecutors wanted. This is what they pushed for, but it wasn't what the judge eventually chose.
Okay.
Their surprise? The judge went for the third option, which was the most lenient. Nate would be sent to a juvenile detention center, and he would stay there till he was 21.
I'm more lenient to this option than the other ones because depending on the detention center that he is, I don't know how detention centers are, but if he's in a place where he can have positive influences and positive role models around him, I really feel like it can give him a better opportunity to change for the better. Obviously, it's going to suck being in juvie for all of your like teen and adult years, but I mean, I feel like it's the most fair option because at the end of the day, a life was still taken. I'm always on the side of y'all should have done the actions to prevent this in the first place, but what's done is done, you know, so,
After which, he would become a free man. And at the age of 13, Nathaniel Abraham began what was supposedly a long road of rehabilitation. The state had less than 8 years to rehabilitate Nate. Would they succeed?
Would they?
On the 13th of January 2000, Nate was placed in the care of the Michigan Department of Human Services for treatment and rehabilitation. Then he was moved to Maxie Boys Training School. And to everyone's surprise, by August of that very year, he began to show signs of responsibility. Throughout 2001, he passed all of his classes, and he was praised for his academic performance in math, reading, and note-keeping. By 2003, Nate was described as a leader within his group. He displayed a positive attitude, took on additional work, and followed directions. At this point, his supervisors decided it was time to get him to work in the real world. So at the age of 17, Nate began working in a Goodwill store. And before long, his employers at the store indicated that he displayed good communication skills and that he was courteous with the customers. Eventually, on the 18th of December and at the age of 18, Nathaniel earned his GED. The following year, he would earn his high school diploma, and eventually, he was just 1 year away from his release. So, was Nate rehabilitated? Had the juvenile system succeeded in transforming?
I'm getting a bad feeling about you asking this question before. Why didn't you just tell us? Why are you giving us the question? I would hope that he was, and that made me feel good to know that him having that positive influence put him in a positive direction. So I hope that that was the case, but let's see.
The 11-year-old killer into a functioning member of society? He had shown constant progress through the years, and the world was about to find out if they had succeeded. If you noticed, the reports I relayed to you felt a little bit too clean, too sugary. Something was off.
Yeah.
Well, you can blame me for that because I deliberately omitted some details. Nate had...
What did I say? I knew something was about to pop up.
Anger issue. To be quite frank, he had a lot of issues. Enough of them to require several disciplinary actions taken against him. Nate had an affinity for getting into fights, even though he never really started them. He had a pattern of yelling at prison staff. During basketball games or any competitive sports, Nate had the tendency to get heated. He also had sticky fingers and had been caught more than once stealing cleaning supplies to give to his girlfriend. Again, most of these missteps were seen as just that. Missteps.
Yeah,
normal for any youth. What mattered was that he no longer participated in the crimes he had committed when he was 9. Remember? Larceny, malicious destruction of property, assault and illegal entry, murder. Nathaniel Abraham hadn't killed anyone in the 8 years since the trial. So on the 18th of January 2007, after spending nearly a decade in juvenile detention, Nate was free, released into society. He was a free man.
I love to see it. Fuck. He said, I wish this was the end of the story. I was hoping it was. I hope he ain't getting no trouble, but it's been damn 2007. That means, bro, 7 years. What happened in 7 years, bro? Please. Not even 7 years. 14? Oh my gosh, I'm high, y'all. Don't beg me. Ah. Okay. I'm thinking, no way I am that stuck right now. But yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. I gotta pull out the calculator. I can do basic math, but I'm doing too much at once because I'm making sure all these junks are recording while paying attention to the video. Yo, no. There's no way I'm doing this. It's 2024, 24 minus 7. Okay. So that's like 17 years. Damn. Was I right? Because there's no way I'm about to... Yo, I hope ain't nobody baking me, yo. Okay, yeah, okay, 17. There's no way I took that long to do that, but something was telling me, like, you know how, like, you know you're right, but for some reason you feel wrong? Yeah.
This was the end of the story, and I wish I could wrap it up here with some Disney-esque happily ever after.
So in 2007, he was arrested again and charged with selling drugs. Oof. What type of drugs? Damn. He got that pimp shit on, so I don't think it was just the green. Oh, man.
But, unfortunately, there were more issues ahead for Nate.
Fuck.
For the first 18 months of his newfound freedom, nothing remotely criminal or remarkable happened to Nate. Unfortunately, in May of 2008, Nate was arrested again in Pontiac with 254 ecstasy pills in a liquor bottle bag. He was sentenced to 4 to 20 years in prison, but eventually got paroled in June 2017. Did the rehabilitation fail, or was this just another misstep that Nate would learn from? Well, consider this. After he was discharged from parole in July of 2018, on the 6th of August of that same year, Nate got into more trouble with the police after he exposed himself in front of a 46-year-old neighbor who declined his offer to cut her lawn. 2 days after that incident, he struck deputies who tried...
So, like, did he show his ass? Like, kiss my... That's wild, damn.
Take him into custody for skipping a court appearance. He was charged with resisting and obstructing police, a felony punishable by up to 4 years in prison. Had the system failed Nate, or was this his own doing? Or better still, undoing? In 2019, Nate, who is now 33, was handed a 6 to 40 year prison sentence for selling drugs to an undercover police officer in Farmington Hills. Before the sentence,
he got fucking caught. Oh my gosh. Not by an undercover. Bro, come on now. Fuck.
Pleaded guilty and shown remorse for his actions. This was probably the reason why the judge had been extremely lenient when sentencing him. Because under normal circumstances, he would have had to face another life sentence because of his frequent problems with the law. Nate wasn't alone in court on the day of his sentencing. His mother, siblings, and every relative that had been by his side since the start of his troubling journey with the law almost 20 years before was present. And when the cameras turned to his mother, when the questions about the support she had for her son came up, Gloria Abraham was unwavering. Nothing had changed on her end. I believe in my son, she said. And of course, society doesn't know his life.
Yep.
He will do okay. He's a strong young man.
I love to hear that. Yep.
Thanks for tuning in to Twisted Minds. That was the case of Nathaniel Abraham. And why don't you go ahead and click on one of the 2 videos on your screen for another one of our videos.
Damn.
Hate YouTube ads? You need this Chrome.
Oh my goodness, y'all. That was something. I have a lot of feelings from that, but what do y'all think? Do y'all think that was just the system? Did Nate have a part to play in that? It really is common, like way too common, that a lot of people who, when they start in prison, they shortly end up back in prison. It's like really hard for people to reaccustom to this type of lifestyle, you know? So I don't really put as much blame as the average person as someone for going back, re-slipping and messing up. It's just the system. Like the system isn't really meant to re-ready us for life the way that it's framed it will. That's why like people, you know what I'm saying? I'm never inclined like I'm barely like Diddy, please keep that nigga in jail. But like with like normal people, right? I'm barely inclined to be like they deserve to go to jail. You know, especially if I can see that the thing that they have done could have been prevented. You know what I'm saying? Um, like people addicted to drugs, like I don't think that's a criminal activity. I feel like that's an addiction. You know what I'm saying? That's a sickness that they need help. They don't need to be like of course them going to jail, they're obviously going to go cold turkey. At least that's the suspicion. There is other drugs within the jail walls, so they'll just get addicted to another drug. But like for the most part, like I don't know, it's just the system could be so much better than it is, y'all. And yeah, ain't too much I can say about that. I feel like videos like this will continue to bring awareness to just how common this stuff is, because I'm sure there are other videos and other examples like that. I've seen them. It's just the way shit is, you know what I'm saying? We just gotta move accordingly and be aware. Um, yeah, that is the 11-year-old killer, Nathaniel. Um, I'll probably have other, you know what I'm saying, documentary type shits where I'm reacting to shit. A cool little chill session. You know what I'm saying? Y'all be great. Y'all be safe. Keep getting to that bag. And I'm going to catch y'all in the next video. Peace.